alive! It's alive! It's alive!
I want to play a game.
Hello and welcome to the Sounds from the Grave podcast. My name is Yusuf.
And my name is Vanya.
And let's turn on the juice and see what shakes loose.
That's right, folks. Since last time we did talk about the Howling Horror Nights history, today we will be going into the Howling Horror Nights icon's backstory.
Yes, that's right. We're going to go icon by icon. We're going to give you each icon's backstory. And we're kind of share our thoughts on these icons and their stories as well.
So, Yusuf, what are we starting with today?
So today we got to start off with the first original icon that they made for HHN Orlando, and that is, of course, the infamous Jack the Clown.
He's actually one of my favorite icons in the event.
I agree. He's also one of mine. So, right off the bat, let me tell you this. Jack was the first icon with, a big, elaborate backstory. Another thing about him, too, is every year that he is an icon for HHN or even a shared icon with the other icons, they always expand on his backstory a little bit, and they've kind of made him like a whole story for him now.
Well, that's actually really cool because it just seems like every Howling Horror Nights, it seems like to all connect very well.
It does, yeah. And they've definitely built up a very expansive lore for Jack. So, let's begin. So I can tell you right off the bat here, Jack was actually born in the Shady Brook Rest Home and Sanitarium, along with his brother Eddie, who is another, not really an icon, but is in a lot of the promo material and has been in Horror Nights, but isn't a full-fledged icon. But we'll get to that later. For a while, though, he was a carnival worker in the circus of Dr. Oddfellow, who was kind of his boss at the time, and there are hints of Oddfellow in several years of Horror Nights. Most recently, you can actually see him in the tribute store. You can see his little wagon from his old circus.
You know what's crazy to me?
Yeah.
Is that, we never actually see Oddfellow in Halloween Horror Nights. I always wondered what this Oddfellow looked like, his demeanor towards Jack, and especially the history between Jack the Clown and Dr. Oddfellow himself.
Yeah, that'd be actually a really cool thing to see, kind of like a prequel house to Jack, to, see, how it is that he got into touch, and, he got in contact with Oddfellow for the first time and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But, of course, everybody has a dark side, and in Jack's case, he was actually a secret child murderer. And in around 1920, the police and the FBI were actually getting a little bit close to discovering his secret, and he started kind of panicking. So he went up to Oddfellow and told him a secret, and Oddfellow asked Jack to show him the bodies of where all the children were killed. And he actually betrayed Jack. He had Jack murdered and put his corpse in the House of Horrors as an exhibit and kind of just showed him off to people.
What's also really crazy to me is that Jack also stored these children in these boxes. I forgot what they're called, but in 3 boxes, and there was 13 children, I believe, or was
yes.
it?
Yes.
Or was it 15? I feel like it's 13.
I think it was 13 children that he had killed.
Yeah, so the fact that he was able to keep all those children in 3 boxes alone was just it just sends shivers down my spine. But that's how every infamous murder or killer story always starts.
Yep. But what's interesting here is after he was killed, there was nothing going on for 6 years until a TV crew from the BBC was actually making a documentary on abandoned haunts and all that kind of stuff, and carnivals. And they actually stumbled upon Jack's decomposing body and the bodies of all the children he had killed. It was actually inside of a big Jack-in-the-Box that he was just kind of there.
Well, I know that they also had it was very close to in Louisiana, I think it was called. It was located in Louisiana, and the fact that they were able to see Jack's body, but it wasn't in a jack-in-a-box. It looked like a jack-in-a-box, but it did have the colorful words, kind of children, like the children lettering of the Jack in the Box. But
Okay.
it is stated that it's not like a Jack in the Box. But I'm pretty sure like they elaborated on it, especially since the logo is him coming out of the Jack
Of
in the
a Jack
Box.
in the
So
Box, yeah.
yes,
S- So once they found his body, he was actually sent to a hospital. Or actually, not really a hospital. I guess it would be a morgue since it's a decomposing body.
yeah.
But the coroner's van and Jack's body later actually disappeared in a freak accident where they were kind of just disappeared into the swamps of Louisiana. But sometime later, actually, the bodies of that BBC crew were found like murdered, like horribly murdered.
With them, or was it like somewhere else? Because that's the one part that I was a little bit confused. Was
Yeah,
like,
they. And when I was doing my research, I couldn't really find like a specific um, location of where their bodies were. It just says that they were found murdered.
I just know that within my research, when we were supposed to mention this in the last podcast, but then we just said, just screw it. We'll just do the icons in another podcast because that's just gonna take more time. But they did. Where I found it, it was just like it was in the where the van was tossed into the lake with Jack's body, where it was on its way to, well, not on its way to the morgue. Yeah, it was on its way to the morgue actually, and then they actually found the BBC crew members on board because it was just kind of like they're the ones that messed up and opened the Jack in the Box to let him loose, or the curse of Jack, if you want to call it that.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, in any case, after all that mess, there was like legends were spread about Jack's decomposing body going on murder sprees, uh, like as the years went on.
Ugh.
But I guess eventually these things just kind of stopped because in 2000, Universal actually purchased the props from the House of Horrors, and in those props was Jack's box. And at some point or another, probably by some unlucky team member, he opened the box and Jack was unleashed on the park, and he kind of lingered in there for a couple of years, just terrorizing guests. And now it's at this point that we kind of learned that, based on that, Jack was actually undead at the time.
Hmm.
But it wasn't actually until HHN's Sweet 16 that he was resurrected as a mortal. So before then, he was just an undead, almost like a killer ghost.
Yeah, I think that's actually like really cool because even then, like his first original like outfit was just all clown white with a whole bunch of polka dots.
Yep.
But we're not introduced to a new outfit until 25, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, but right after Sweet 16, Jack was actually caught by authorities and sent back to Shady Brook. But even though he was in max security, he was actually still influencing the other inmates at the asylum. And it got to a head at some point, and the inmates started a riot. They tortured hospital staff, and they ended up making Jack the de facto leader of the asylum.
Let's start a riot. The riot. Sorry, that's all I could think of. Just to see Jack just unleashing total hell into
Yeah.
this hospital, and the fact that they actually followed a clown. Like, just imagine a bunch of inmates instead of it being intimidated by him, they're like, "Yo, let's follow him." You know,
Yes.
not be intimidated by any of his crazy clownness, but you
No,
know.
he's just like us. He's just cooler. He's a clown. Now, among that chaos, while he was running the asylum, he did find records detailing that his old boss, Oddfellow, was actually still alive, and he was running a small carnival now.
Oh, what a unlucky
Yep.
motherfucker! Why isn't he dead? It's been 60 years. The lifespan is supposed to be 60 years, or a little bit older
It
if you are
depends.
lucky.
Yeah, it depends.
Unless like
Um,
Oddfellow is immortal, which proves my point. Which he should have been a character at least in one of the houses or somewhere.
So, because of this, Jack actually left Shady Brook, and he ended up traveling to Oddfellow's carnival. And there he stalked Oddfellow and finally took his vengeance by murdering him. Um, and that's kind of where Jack first went through one of his like first transformations. Because there he changes his outfit. He's now dressed in a bright red coat and boots, and this is when he becomes the ringmaster.
Which is
And
really one of my favorite outfits ever because I feel like it's very simple, but it actually like represents like him actually taking the mantle of being like this king of Halloween Horror
Yeah,
Nights.
definitely. Um, Now he does do a couple of things as well here. He does take Oddfellow's prized possession, which is actually a cane of souls, which I guess might explain why he was able to live for that long. Like maybe he was able to trap souls in there, and that would extend his life.
Yeah,
It's possible.
that could also be a possibility.
And now the biggest thing that he did after he took control of the carnival was he killed everybody that worked for the carnival except for one person, and that was Chance.
And the actual like if you guys well, it's not mentioned in a lot of Halloween Horror Nights history websites and stuff, but if you go to YouTube, we see the actress Erin Klein actually explain the story a little bit more of like how like Jack actually came to get a hold of Chance and how she just happened to come to be.
And now, at this point, as well in his story, Jack decided to reopen Oddfellows Carnival as his own. But of course, he had murdered all the acts and all the exhibits over there, so he spent the next few months looking for new talent for his carnival. And he gathered a bunch of monsters, madmen, mutants, and maniacs. And among those were Mary Shaw from Dead Silence, Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, and Leatherface.
Which is why they had the where Universal actually did that contract with New Line Cinema.
Yep. And after 1 year of that, that's when Jack opened his Carnival of Carnage here in Orlando.
Which is probably the beginning of his reign until forever down the road.
Yep.
I
Now,
mean,
however, there is-
they have threatened to kill Jack. Universal has tried, but everybody just brings him back.
Yeah, I would say that's not going to happen. He's too
So
popular to kill.
it was just here's the creation. You want to put it to retirement? It's kind of like SpongeBob. It never dies. Sorry.
However, in 2010, things were a little bit different because that's when we realized that Fear was actually the one behind everything that was going on in Halloween Horror Nights. And when he was unleashed in 2010, he selected all the icons as heralds. Um, so Jack became one of those heralds, and he earned the title of Chaos. Because what is Jack if not an agent of chaos?
Well, that it goes with fear and chaos. It goes hand in hand because
Exactly.
what is fear without chaos, and what is chaos without fear? So
Precisely.
hmm
However, about 5 years later, Jack let me backtrack a little bit. Because of this, Jack did earn some supernatural abilities because of his new status as Herald of Fear. And because of this, he kind of became drunk with his own power, and after a while, he just wanted the spotlight for himself because he's a showman. So he ended up creating a cult that he called Jack's Maniacs, and at some point, his superiority complex just became so high that he just believed he was Horror Nights incarnate. And he actually expanded his Carnival of Carnage. However, he was still essentially a mortal, because after that second Carnival of Carnage, Jack and Chance were actually detained by the authorities, and Jack was resealed away in his box. Only problem is, the current location of the box is still unknown.
darn. But it's not like the story wasn't going to continue this year. Damn COVID. But but I cannot wait until what happens next to these two lovable characters.
Yep, exactly. So that's kind of Jack's story in a nutshell. Now, inspiration-wise, there's a lot of many things that they took bits and pieces from to create Jack. A lot of those were, the main thing was actually inspired by examples of coulrophobia, which is actually the fear of clowns. Those were taken from both real life and fiction. One of the real life possible inspirations was the Phantom Clown's urban legend, and this was around like the mid to late 80s. These were supposed clowns or men dressed partially as clowns who attempted to lure and abduct children. kind of similar, but not as actually, kind of similar to what we had. Was it about 5, 6 years ago
I
when
think it
people
was
were
2016
when people were like
or
running into clowns?
2017. I think it was 2016 or
Oh,
2017 that I think where they had the whole clown abductions or like the harassing of,
yeah.
Yeah, I think was also around the same time it came out, so it was not great timing.
It was not a great time for clowns,
No.
unfortunately. Other major inspirations include the serial killer John Wayne Gacy, who, as kind of serial killer history wise, he was a serial killer and he was also a party clown for children, known as, was it Pogo?
Yeah, I
It's
think so.
Pogo.
Yeah.
And another big inspiration, and I think kind of like the big, like obvious inspiration to most people would probably be he's like an even darker version of Batman's Joker.
Which makes sense because he is also considered the Prince of Horror
Mm-hmm.
in Howling Horror Nights terminology to them.
Yep. Another big inspiration for it too. Not really an inspiration, but kind of like the idea, or like the spark of the idea for Jack also came from surveys that Universal put out, and they were asking people about their frights and their phobias, and clowns, a fear of clowns was the thing that popped up the most. So they were like, oh, we can work with this, we can run with this.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's kind of crazy that, like, clowns just happens to be a phobia. It was never a phobia for me. I mean, I get why they would be scary to children,
It was for me as
but,
a kid. I
like,
was I was scared of clowns as a kid.
oh, I was never scared of clowns. I thought they were funny and I thought they were like cool and all that stuff. Like a little weird, yeah, but like maybe I was just not exposed to like the TV series or any of that stuff that made me afraid of them. But I just never understood why. Why did it scare you?
For me, I think it was a combination of several things. For me, first of all, it was the laugh. I didn't like clown laughs. They kind of freaked me out because I'm like, that's not how a normal person laughs. That's unnatural.
It's to build character.
And it was also like the few times that I met clowns, they would like get up in my face and I'd be like, just back it up a little bit. Like, you're scaring me. I don't know you.
Maybe that's probably like the whole like stranger danger and all that stuff because I always
Hmm.
had clowns at my birthdays as a kid.
See,
Guess.
I never did. That's why.
Oh,
That might be why.
that's fair.
And now, in like the real life aspect of Jack the Clown, he is most often portrayed by actor James Keaton, a Horror Nights legend.
Yes, and James Keaton, and like if you're listening, you're awesome.
We love you.
All right, let's not go that far. You're gonna scare him away. He's like, I'm gonna click away now.
Oh, come on. And but other people have portrayed Jack. Back in 2015, it was actually WWE ring announcer Mike Rome. And
that's
back
very
in the
cool.
year 2000, it used to be HHN creative director Michael Aiello.
Wow, he was that. He was Jack, or did he just create it? Oh, I think wasn't he like a scare actor before he became
I
a
think so,
creative
yeah.
director? Because I feel like I went to Twitter and I saw like a throwback, and I saw him in like almost like scare actor makeup.
Hmm.
So like, correct us if we're wrong, but I mean I feel like I saw this on Twitter the other day, but just let us know.
Please do. But that's very interesting. Because when I first read that, I was like, really? He played Jack?
Yeah, I mean, someone had to take the mantle. I mean, he's too busy creating basically stuff for Jack or Howling Horror Nights
Mhm.
in general, so somebody else had to do the acting while he's also
Yeah.
creating the event. So that makes sense where he's gonna have to step down, but he can go on as the first one. So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Like, he was essentially the first Jack. So.
Yeah. So we are now going to another icon, which I think this was the second, and it is the caretaker. His real name is Dr. Albert Kane, which is such a really like interesting name because it just sounds very doctorish, even though I know it's not super doctory, but it can be. So he was the second original icon developed and used for Howling Horror Nights Islands of Fear in 2002, not 12. That's wrong. But like it was like I think that was the year that they only had it in Howling Horror Nights Islands of Adventure, right?
Yes, because I think for the next 3 years, from '02 to '05, or no, it was from '02 to '04. I think it was exclusively.
No, it's six. It
Oh,
was
oh,
six.
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
And because I mean, we're gonna go back to that to a second. Sorry,
Yeah.
sidetracked. But he was portrayed by Hank Stone in commercials and other promotional media. So we are gonna go down to his backstory. He was once a well-respected surgeon, and he became the caretaker of Shady Oak Cemetery in Willamette,
Yeah, I think that's
Valley.
Willamette. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a. There's so many L's that it's just like, oh, I'm letter dyslexic.
Which
So
actually,
like,
funny enough, later on when they were expounding on their stories, they created Willamette Valley was actually placed as part of Cary, Ohio.
I mean, isn't one of the creative directors like from Cary, Ohio, which is why
Yeah.
so many of these primary stories are
Hmm.
from there.
Yeah. So like, yeah, that's kind of like their basis, like from where everything kind of started. But yeah, from back in the day, they didn't have Cary, Ohio yet. So when they retconned a bunch of stuff, they made Willamette Valley part of Cary, Ohio.
That's really cool. So later converted his mansion into a mortuary and funeral parlor, which is super scary because it's just kind of like that's another that okay, so this is one of my phobias. I don't like seeing dead people. It freaks me out, and the one thing is that it's just the smell and the way that like have you ever seen like a if you're in science class and you're just literally like dissecting a one that's been in preservatives, that's
Hmm.
what it smells like to me. It's so
Oh, like
disgusting.
the
So I feel like
formaldehyde.
yeah, so thank God I've never seen the actual year of the caretaker because if they had a house like that, I would not survive. I would be free. And if they used the smell, even worse. So anyway, for years he was interested in the workings of the human body, particularly what happens to a person when they die. So the caretaker eventually used the deceased as guinea pigs for bizarre experiments. So what is ticking in my head right now is like you can't figure out what happened because they're dead. If you could talk to the dead, you
Exactly.
can actually find out what happens after you die. At that point, it's just you go to purgatory or something. You go to hell, heaven, whatever you believe in, or you go to what was it? You just get so many people like
What you
72
go to?
wives. Was that it? Was that it? I don't know. But
Oh.
anyway. So the extended family dug up the bodies and used it for experiments for parties and house decorations. So that's really just having a family gathering and just dissecting
Yeah.
bodies like it was like no
It's just a
biggie.
Saturday night with the Canes. You just come in, you're racing some cane.
So instead of going to church, we dissect bodies for dinner and for church
Yes.
sermons. Do you guys want some?
It's
Anyway,
like who needs KFC when you got Jim that just died a year ago?
exactly. I mean, like the population in Cary, Ohio is not that big, so that is
No.
very concerning. So Kane performed these experiments in order to attempt to discover the nature of the soul. So he would go to town and find homeless people. He would invite them into their home under the guys
Oh
geese.
my god. Under the geese. I'm just imagining like this giant goose that he just rides around in.
Oh, God, sorry
Yeah,
guys.
he
Like
doesn't have like a he doesn't have a
like
horse and buggy. He just has like a giant goose that
Yusuf's
he.
notes kind of suck. So like
I am. They do not. Okay.
they're very in depth, but he's using big words, and I don't like big words.
It's just.
Um,
It's guys. It's disguise without the dis.
guys, geese. All right. Anyway, under the guise of charitable offer, instead he would perform surgeries on them while conscious and without anesthetic. Oh,
Lovely.
love that. I mean, I I would understand because if they're at the point of dying, I'm like, what do you see? Do you see the lights? They're like, I don't know, man. Just like, oh man, but that he was one twisted fuck.
Yeah, he
Like that,
was.
but I feel like that's what makes him very intriguing. And instead of like, I'm surprised that Universal has never done like a doctor type icon because there's also the fear of doctors because they think they might
Yeah.
kill them or accidentally like pull something wrong, but like the fact that this is as close to a doctor they could get, this is actually very ideal for an icon.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of his work included chemical injections, brutal amputations, live dissections, castrations without anesthetic, electroshock, and organ removal. So this
Yeah.
makes me wonder, were they still like conscious during the entire thing? Because I feel like once they open you up and they start removing stuff, like you're already seeing like your organs and like everything inside you will be like reaching the air, and it doesn't, how
Yeah.
when blood is exposed to oxygen, it's just like it either spills more blood or you dry up, and then that's not normal.
Yeah, I think it's just like a combination of like things that he did to people that while they were still alive and others to like after they were already dead.
Oh, interesting. Oh, well, caretaker, you have officially freaked me out. The caretaker also performed experiments in fear to see how much the human mind could take before succumbing to the madness and death.
Which
Oh,
I think would put him rather in very good company with Bloody Mary.
yes, I agree, which is kind of, ooh, now that I think about it, that's very interesting.
Yeah, could you imagine like a
So,
group project with two of them?
oh no. I mean, yes, but oh no. I mean, I think I like Bloody Mary more than the caretaker, but I already told you guys I don't like dead people, or I don't like being around dead people. Like, zombies are fine, they're still alive to a certain extent, but just not.
But not
You go to a
corpses.
morgue, oh no. Because, oh, just the smell and everything. Ugh. Anyway, so like the caretaker witnessed by two teenagers walking past the cemetery who saw the Kane family dancing with the remains of the rotted corpses. I mean, if it was me, I'd be like, yo, you do you, man, as long as you don't take us,
Yeah.
Bye. Like, deuces. Just
I
don't take
wonder.
us for Sunday.
I wonder where they were dancing to, like what song they were playing that they were dancing to.
It's probably a lot of Victorian type music. Or what year was this?
I think it was like supposed to be in like in the 1800s.
The 1800s? Yeah, that's
I'm
that
just thinking
seems
like
right about right.
so I'm just like thinking of like Victorian versions of like popular songs now. Like a
Uh,
Victorian version of like Dead Man's Party by Oingo Boingo.
oh Jesus, no. So it seems like the teenagers couldn't hold their tongue, and word of this spread to the police, and the family was placed under house arrest. Well, you were
I don't
dancing
know.
around a couple of corpses. Of
Yeah.
course, that's concerning. Like,
I'm like, why house arrest though? Like, there's, it's terrible. Like, why would you just put them in house arrest?
I mean, it was a different time in the 1800s, I guess. So Kane gladly cooperated and even shared results of his research with the authorities. The local townspeople were horrified and formed a mob to set fire to the mansion while the Kane family was still trapped inside. So it's kind of like those outsiders, like, kind of like Adam's family, like Frankenstein. There's something terrible going
Yeah.
on. Just form a mob, put
See, I would
everything
have
on
even
fire.
said,
It's fine.
I would have even said, like the new, kind of like the Texas Chainsaw stuff, because at least on the god awful Texas Chainsaw 3D,
Uh-huh.
it's actually like a sequel to the first Texas Chainsaw. Like it ignores the other ones, and based on that story, literally the day after the events of the first Texas Chainsaw, an angry mob forms and like sets fire to their house.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, now as we move forward, it is the investigators that were unable to find the body of Kane or any of his family members except for his daughter Cindy, And this is what makes me wonder. I mean, I know that this is just a story. Who did the caretaker sleep with? Oh God, is Bloody Mary. Kidding. But like, I was like,
Well, see, what I'm
where
thinking
did?
is like, I think he was like married and had a family before he kind of went crazy.
But Cindy was okay with this. Little Cindy was okay with this.
Listen, that whole family was crazy.
This is true, but you know. So the investigators found a network of tunnels leading through the home cellar. Inside, they found several remains of corpses in various stages of decomposition. Decomposition. Guys, words. So
Which
that's
honestly, that would like kill me if I were like walk in and see stuff like that. I would immediately, the first thing I do is throw up right off the bat.
uh, I can never imagine the smell of a dead person. Honestly,
Mm-mm.
like
Especially
I
when
mean,
they're
I've
like decomposing and
smelled
stuff. Mm-mm.
I've smelled them in preservatives,
Exactly.
but
That's different.
or animals. I heard that animals and humans are very terrible when they're dying or when they're
Like they smell
decomposing
terrible.
rather. Yeah, and but
Mm.
like I cannot imagine. Apparently, I heard it's one of the worst smells that you could ever experience.
Oh
Like
man, I
so,
can't. I can't
he had a
imagine
stomach. The caretaker had a stomach.
that.
This should just be called, instead of discussing the icons' backstory, how bad we are reacting to every single one of their terrible actions, but we somehow still love them.
Yeah, exactly. We learn to live past the flaws.
Exactly. I mean, there's Ted Bundy, there's Jeffrey
Ed Gein.
Dahmer, there's but we're so like we know that they were terrible people, but don't you guys tell me that you guys are not guilty of watching those like
Documentaries.
documentaries and you are so intrigued by their life that you somehow know everything about them.
Yeah.
We're twisted people too, the horror community, but we love you. Anyway, so 1 year later, the cemetery was off limits to the public and was set to be demolished. I mean, duh, like they killed thousands of people and experimented on them just because they want to know where they go after they die. It's blackness. It's you're done. You're done. Your life is meaningless. No, I'm kidding. And for those of you with religious beliefs, I'm not trying to diss you, or I mean, I have my beliefs of where we go after we die, but you know, that's not that kind of podcast. But you know, like this for them in the 1800s, nothing happens. So it did. It was stopped due to the discovery of 3 decomposing bodies on the premises. People last reported in the vicinity began to go missing. Research teams were sent out to investigate, but none of them returned. I mean, don't you think that the caretaker is still alive and that he's still like experimenting on people? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
are we
But at
are
the
we
same
not?
time, like, do you want to keep sending out research teams only for nobody to come back?
I mean, to
And
be
you're like,
fair,
I mean, kind of just like let him do his thing. I guess we can't really stop him at this point.
I don't know what is up with Universal's like idea of like a team or something like an investigative team, a documentary team. They all somehow do some stupid shit to aggravate these icons more. Like, stop. I mean, that's what makes their like stories intriguing. But let's just do a human sacrifice to these icons. This is the prime of their killings. We love that. So it is unknown if the caretaker was undead or alive, along that he still lived on in a sense. With the help of a mysterious god that he took control of various creatures such as the Treeks and Foons, Nightmare and Carnage, which is some of the scare zones that were featured in the Islands of Fear.
Yep, that's correct.
hmm So it plunged in Islands of Adventure into a world infected by the caretaker's darkness, and it continued to reside in his abandoned mortuary and continues his macabre research on victims. I mean, once
Dude's
the
still going
killings,
strong, man. Like,
he's still going strong. It's not like Jack where he gets caught.
no,
he,
this
he-
guy's just
he-
like, hey, I'm over here now. No, but you missed me. I'm over here now.
Exactly. So what's crazy to me is that like I say what's crazy to me a lot. So sorry about that, guys. So take a shot every time you hear that. Don't do it, please. You're gonna end up in a hospital. But like, but with Jack, he got caught by the authorities. But caretaker's like, oh man, all right, I'll be on house arrest. But you guys want to
Yeet.
see my dead bodies? Yeah, I'll show you my notes. Just here. Let me show you what I think happens after we die. It's fantastic. So in maybe year 20 of the
Yep.
anniversary 20 is when Fear was summoned again, as we mentioned earlier, and he was selected as the Herald of Death, which I feel like it's fitting because he does have a lot of that sense of like graveyard, mortuaries, morgues, funerals, which is basically he just collects all the souls, all the
Yep.
bodies of all the guests in the park that die
This is
spiritually, not
he.
actually, but spiritually.
Not only that, considering the amount of people that he's killed, he's definitely caused a lot of death. So
So the inspiration behind the caretaker was reminiscent of the Victorian era killers such as Jack the Ripper and Sweeney Todd. I mean, we all love Sweeney Todd, right?
yes, we
Like,
do.
I really love that story. I think I don't like dead people, but I do really do like when storytellers get really creative with the way that these killers go about their business and why they do it, which
Hmm.
is why I feel like it's very interesting that house decorations was inspired by Ed Gein. I mean, Ed Gein was an inspiration for a lot of killers and a
That is
lot of
true.
stories, which is crazy to me because I'm surprised that there's not a museum of this kid. I mean, we shouldn't be celebrating it, but like it's because of him we have a lot of these awesome like horror stories that we know
Yeah,
today.
he's definitely like the biggest inspiration for a lot of modern horror.
Exactly. So he resembles the tall man from the Phantasm film series, and his family possibly inspired by the Charles Manson and his family. I mean, that's very fitting, actually.
Yeah.
So like, I totally get why they went with this concept, especially with things that have to do with morgues and dead people and all that lovely stuff that we know from, a lot of horror films based on families and killing. House of a
Yes.
Thousand Corpses, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We love family gatherings of just killing people. So you want to take
Like,
it away for the next one?
can you just imagine Thanksgiving for these families though?
It's a whole feast. They
Oh
just
yeah.
go about. They're like, oh, it's Thanksgiving dinner. We should go out and get something or someone. It's like,
Yep.
let's get Sarah from the Super Walmart down the street. Not that Walmart existed for that long.
They're like, no, no, let's just order. Let's just order Chinese. Let's order pizza. Let's order a bunch of food, and then
And
not eat any
Italian.
of it, and just wait for the delivery guys to come in.
Exactly. We have a little bit of everything in our family for
Exactly.
Thanksgiving.
We want a buffet.
Yes. So as I was saying, you want to take it away for the next icon?
Yes, I do. So our next icon is none other than the director, who is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, icon for HHN. Now, the director, his story is a little bit convoluted. Um, right off the bat, I can tell you he does have three different names.
Yeah.
His original name was Paolo Rabinsky, which was for HHN Orlando, but it was recently changed back in Sweet 16. It was changed to Paolo.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
but for Hollywood, his name is Pavel Pranevsky. And then for HHN Singapore, his name is Billy Skorky,
Oh,
which is like the
interesting.
least scary last name for anything. It's like, what's your name? Skorky.
Well, remember that in Singapore
It's
and they
different.
have
Yeah.
different pronunciations of things. And
Yeah.
also, like, you just confirmed it for me that because I didn't believe that Howling Horror Nights Hollywood actually acknowledged these icons in any shape or form.
Hmm.
So, because over there we don't see icon stuff because it's just they do a lot of IPs and originals, but
Yeah.
I never knew that icons were a thing over there in Hollywood because I can talk to anybody from Hollywood and they're like, "Who's that?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's an Orlando thing." Got it.
Yeah, Hollywood uses them sparingly, but they don't make them like a huge, like a draw like they do it here in Orlando.
Yeah.
Like
I
here,
mean,
you're
that
like,
makes
oh, the
sense.
director's like the main icon this year again, and you're like, over there, it's just like he's like the backdrop really for it.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
depressing. I mean, it makes me a little bit glad that, Orlando
you get the
has
good stuff though.
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the director himself actually he was the main event icon for HHN 13. But he has also appeared at, just like we said, at HHN Hollywood, and he was also the first icon for HHN in Singapore.
Oh,
Yeah.
very cool.
The only I would say like the biggest difference is there, at least with like between the Hollywood and Orlando versions and the Singapore version. The
Mm-hmm.
Singapore version has a completely different character design. Like he doesn't have
Oh,
like the long hair.
interesting.
He actually looks almost like a 1930s movie director
Oh,
with like the little
very
like
cool.
the almost like the little pencil thin like Walt Disney mustache and like that
Oh
type of clothing
no.
style. He looks like that.
Oh no. Well, I mean, that's a little too far. I mean, Universal is savage to a point, but like, come on now.
Well, this is Singapore we're talking about. That's even more savage. They're just like, whatever, man. Oh, this is evil Disney now.
Exactly. Not like anybody would really know, but
Yeah. All right. So backstory wise, the director, and this is another weird thing that they have for the director. Every version of the director, whether it's Orlando, Hollywood, or Singapore. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
Singapore does not have much of a backstory. They haven't really made one for him. But at least Orlando and Hollywood, he has two different backstories.
Oh, tell me the Hollywood one first because Orlando, I feel like we are some twisted fucks.
So, well, actually, before I get to that, let me tell you like his backstory. This is like the story that is like applies to each version of him. So, he was actually born in Eastern Europe, and he aspired to be a filmmaker. But he started out making snuff films and capturing like human suffering, death, and torture on camera. And his first big project was this controversial film in his country known as The Widow's Eye. The thing is, this movie was so shocking and so controversial. He was actually forced out of his country and he had to move to America.
Wow, it reminds me a little bit of the creator of Universal because, well, in a way, because like the creator or the basically the owner of Universal,
Hmm.
like when he started making horror films, like he just gathered every director from Germany and moved to America to like give all the directors a shot to like do their own
Yeah.
creativity during the World War II because like that's when Hitler was kind of like grabbing directors to try and do his own film, but he got away before it even got to him or the other
Hmm.
directors that were trying to come to America. So like it kind of looks like a little bit of an inspiration there, but like
Yeah, it's definitely
go on.
possible. So anyway, that's like his basic backstory. Anything that's the what applies to both Orlando and Hollywood. But now it's one thing's a little bit different. In the Hollywood version of the director's story, that's where his name is Pavel Pernevsky. He was actually hired by Universal Studios to create the ultimate horror movie. But before he began, the Universal requested a demo reel, and good old Pavel, he sent them a snuff film.
Ooh. Oh,
Yeah,
that's not how
right?
demo reels work, Pavel.
Yeah, so
Director.
first of all, it's not just one film. You have to make a couple different snuff films, and then you send those in, and it's a 3-minute package. Two
Ooh.
minutes, actually. But you can't just shoot one snuff film. You gotta shoot several.
Oh, yikes.
And of course,
Anyway,
because of this, Universal canceled the project and they completely banned him from ever setting foot in Universal property again.
I beg to differ.
But again, Mr. Pavel here, he actually decided to take up residence in the abandoned backlot in the park, and he just kind of chilled over there and just vowed revenge.
Oh, that's one way to do it. I
Yeah.
mean, like he was already there, so like,
Yeah.
well, he was outside. He's like, let me just go around the back way real quick. I'm like,
Yeah.
this looks like an abandoned building. Got it.
But then
Sounds good.
Universal, this is where Universal is lacking, though, because right off the bat, Universal knew that he was still in the back lot. And they were like, you know what, screw it. Run HHN 2006 anyway. Just do it, it's fine.
I was like, roll the clip. It's like it's controversial. Roll the clip.
Did I stutter?
Did I stutter?
Yeah. So anyway, Pavel would take over the backlot tram tour, and he would subject guests to horrifying and deadly situations, as the director tends to do.
Oh, I mean, like, it just makes me wonder because have you ever seen? I think I saw it in one of the videos when I was doing the research on the icons. Like,
Mhm.
Didn't he like record someone like in the bathtub, like electrocuted or like
Yeah.
dying? I forgot.
Yeah,
Like,
he's done a couple different, like,
I wonder
films
if
that are shown
that
and
like
promotional stuff.
appeared like in the tram tour. I wonder if that appeared like you just see someone in the tub just fucking like.
Well, actually, we'll get to that in just a second, because that's actually it for his Hollywood story. There's not really a lot there for him. But now we move on to the Orlando story. It's a little bit more fleshed out. There's a little bit more to it. So it's kind of a similar concept where he was hired by Universal, but in this case, they hired him to film his newest horror film at Islands of Adventure. What he decided to do was actually turn the park into a living horror movie, and he hosted his own torture show where he would torture like members of the audience, and he would film their reactions.
Oh,
Yes.
interesting.
And then he would, after that event, he actually returned for HHN Sweet 16. And this is when they actually renamed him to Paolo. And this time he was actually featured in an ensemble show, and this is where he would electrocute somebody in a bathtub.
Oh my gosh!
Like
Did
that
I
was
just?
his big like moment, because during that ensemble show, each icon would do like a signature kill, and that was his.
Oh, that's so
Which is
freaking
pretty funny,
cool.
right? Yeah.
I was actually thinking about that because it also reminds me a little bit of Bride of Chucky. I'm also gonna reference that in this video or not video podcast because I freaking can. Like she dies by electrocution
In a bathtub.
in a bathtub.
Yep.
Which is also supposed to be an homage to Bride of Frankenstein anyway.
Yes, it is.
Because she's watching it and then she becomes the Bride of Chucky, that kind of thing. But it just reminds me of that's like it's kind of a snuff film within itself. So
Yes.
like it's great. Love references. And I think it was also done by Universal, I think that movie too.
What, Bride of Chucky?
Yeah.
Yes, it was. It was.
Woo!
And then also here, he after 16, he didn't really make a return until 2010, when Fear was unleashed, and Fear decided to make him one of his heralds as well. Paolo became the Herald of Sacrifice because of his willingness to sacrifice everything in the name of film, including lives.
Ooh.
Yep.
Interesting.
And again, Paolo would not return to HHN actually until 2015 for Jack's new Carnival of Carnage.
That was that long ago?
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing him that year.
Well, he
and
wasn't
I've
really.
done-
He was kind of in the scare zones, and I think he had like one scare zone, but that was really it. He didn't really do much else.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it counts
But
for
at least he was
something.
there. At least he was there. I'll take that.
Yeah.
And
25 years.
yes, exactly. Now here's where things get interesting, because this is where they actually made fan films of the director, and I kind of like these a lot. And I'm not sure if Universal confirmed whether these fan films were going to be made into the canon for the director, but if they haven't, I really hope that they do become canon at one point. But anyway, these are fan films that were made for YouTube in 2004, back when YouTube was a little itty bitty baby. And these
Good
videos portrayed him kind of as a combo of the Orlando and Hollywood versions of the director. And this one, they kind of fleshed out a little bit more of that backstory for him, because here he was actually hired by a specific producer from Universal. His name was Bob Ferguson. But once rumors started circulating about activities of him making snuff films, Bob fired him. and he was actually barred from the studio. However, they kept his likeness to use it for HHN.
I mean, that's super professional. We don't like the way you run things, but hey,
But we're
we'll
gonna use
keep
your
you
face
around.
because you look like a freak, so we'll keep your face.
It's like, get over here, you freak. It's like,
Yep.
what?
But yeah, Paulo wasn't a huge fan of that, so he got revenge. He murdered a ton of actors, a ton of security personnel, and he finally killed Bob Ferguson himself. And of course, he filmed all the killings. And then he vanished completely without a trace. But he would
Someone took
return.
inspiration. Someone took inspiration from the Jack story.
Yeah.
A little bit.
But he would then return several years later, and he would actually make new videos. This time ranting about Hollywood, specifically his hate of horror movie remakes.
Oh no.
Yep.
It looks like a
So
really good story.
he essentially made a rant video for YouTube.
Oh, sweetie, no. Was it the same actor or was it like?
I think it because they were all fan films, so I think it was just like one actor pretending to be the director.
Okay, that would have been interesting if they actually got the actual actor. To
Yeah,
do
that would have been
I'm
really
like,
cool.
Wow, wow, that's one way to like.
Yeah,
you
and
know,
then
company.
he did make another two videos where he actually hunts down a blogger who was writing about her suicidal tendencies, and what he did was he knocked her out and he tied her up, and on camera he convinced her to allow him to take her life, on camera.
Ah,
So he like sweet talked her into like being like, "Hey baby, I know you already want to kill yourself. How about you let me do it?"
it's like you want to end your life? I can end it for you. Just sign
Yeah.
the contract here in blood. They'll mess you up, mad skills, honey, mad skills. I'm gonna make you a star while you die graciously.
I'm gonna make you a star, darling.
And I'm gonna make it look good
Yeah.
dying.
Now, what's interesting about this is that rumors of like this version of the director showing up at HHN have circulated, as well as rumors of part guests disappearing during HHN. But of course, no new videos of him have surfaced, so
Ooh.
he's still kind of a mystery. But what I
that's
like about
cool.
it is, these people went all out making these fan movies, and they actually have like a cult following among like the diehard HHN Orlando community, uh, particularly HHN Vault and Horror Nights Nightmares.
Because we all love Horror Nights Nightmares, and they're the ones that come
Yes.
up with the amazing circulations. Wow,
The speculation
circulation,
maps.
speculations, not circulations, but they do circular around the horror community. But but we do love those accounts very much, and especially since there's amazing like concepts that come up with the icons.
Hmm.
Then it keeps growing. It's a story that just keeps growing amongst all of them.
And also a little bit of trivia on him. This is more of like a canon backstory type of thing, but in terms of the icons, he's actually considered to be the least powerful one. Because even though he is a herald of fear, he actually has like no superpowers per se. Kind of like Jack has his thing, and the caretaker has his thing. The director doesn't really have like any type of supernatural abilities.
It's just the fact that he's like the underdog, but he's like loved by a lot of fans because
Yeah.
he like since we all love horror, we all love films, and but of course I don't know about the snuff films part, but like everything else, it just seems like he's just an ordinary guy, but he is like still a part and essential to the story of this really big story that they created amongst Cary, Ohio.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
So Vanya, what's the next icon that we're discussing today?
So we are now discussing the next icon, which is the storyteller. Her real name is Elizabeth or Elsa Strict. No, not Elsa from Frozen, as I said from the last podcast. So the main event icon for Halloween Horror Nights was the storyteller, and it was titled Tales of Terror. And this happened around Halloween Horror Nights 15, I believe. And she
Yes.
reappeared the following year as a co-icon for Halloween Horror Nights Sweet 16, because it's kind of weird because it seemed like she was the main center of the Halloween Horror Nights Sweet 16 poster almost everywhere, which is probably the first time that I ever heard of Halloween Horror Nights
Yep. So
when
it was for
I
me too.
moved to the States. But I think that was like super interesting that it's not just her, but Jack, caretaker, and I think the director as
Yeah.
well. So, for Howling Horror Nights 16 told a possible origin story for Elsa. As a small child, she was visited by a winged creature who wanted her to skin her alive. So, Krampus, got it. No, not Krampus, but it just seems like a little bit of the moral story. Like, if something comes after you, it's because you've been a bad child and I'm going to skin you alive. But other than that, she retaliated by eating the monster and inheriting its darkness.
Which is what
Well,
you do when you see something coming at you. You just eat it,
as a
right?
child, your imagination runs wild and you eat things. No, I'm kidding. I mean, we eat everything in sight if you were a child. If you were not eating stuff, something's wrong with you.
That's true.
Well, she then ripped the stuffing out of one of her dolls and then murdered her mother with a hammer. So, as a part of Fear's canon, she transported guests to a landscape of her newest story called Terra Crentis, which was also ruled by the Terra Queen within the story. So the queen oversaw the execution of her victims in order to fill blood vats.
Yes.
So that is
In other words, just
very
flats of blood.
interesting. Oh, flats of blood. Got it. Because I was like, wait, blood vats? What are blood vats? What is this? So the blood was used to create the Terra Throne Blade, which was used in a nightly sacrificial ceremonies. Well, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Game of Thrones. Instead of used of swords, it's used with blood. Love that.
See, I would have said like the knife, the sacrificial knife. I think from Evil Dead, where they had to use to kill a book.
Ah, this is true. This is true. But on the last night of the event, the Terra Queen sacrificed herself, and a year later, the Lord of Darkness revived her and the other icons for Halloween Horror Night 16. But which is was crazy because it makes me think, don't like, maybe, don't get me wrong,
Hmm.
maybe. What if Elsa is the Terra Queen? I
That'd
could
be
see
cool.
that being a possibility.
It would be interesting to see her be the Terror Queen. Yeah, it's like
Because if she ate this monster, she inherited the powers of darkness.
hmm
And then she's telling the story it's because she lived it. So I feel like that's a really like in-depth story if it were to go down further that way.
Okay. Well, we'll see.
So she refurbished the Dungeon of Terror, a defunct roadside attraction, and she and her family of rednecks lived in the attraction and waited for unwitting victims. In 2010, it is revealed that she and other icons were servants of fear, and her true name was Legend. I mean, duh. Like, like we already well, there's so many like whatchamacallit, I forgot the word for it. Easter eggs within
Hmm.
like the story within the story because
Yeah.
like I said, she was just telling the story. Then there's the Terror Queen. How is the Terror Queen gonna sacrifice herself if she has and if it's a story and because she has lived it and because stories are made of legends and they're meant to tell people like moral stories or how to like develop the human mind, like
Hmm.
basically like morality between right and wrong. Like
Yeah.
I feel like that's such a fitting name for her.
Legend.
Legend. So eventually returned to Fear's lantern and was locked there. Ooh, that doesn't sound like a fun time.
No.
It's sad because I haven't seen her since.
Yeah. It sounds like Jafar when he gets sent back to the lamp at the end of Aladdin.
Give me the lamp. Ah. But this did not last and was brought back 5 years later when Jack ran the show. It just makes me wonder if, like, since Jack is chaos, that he has the ability that Fear had, just to bring back all the icons, because it's kind of like being the prince of horror, and then probably Fear being like the top king of horror, and then
Yeah.
having to invest in those powers, which is makes me wonder like how the icons were all able to come back for 5 years. But I don't think I ever saw Fear in Howling
25,
Horror
no.
Nights 25.
No, he was never part of 25.
Which it poses a lot of questions, and I really hope it gets answered in 30 when we get it next year. Especially since the merchandise does still incorporate Fear on the T-shirts, on the
Yeah.
mask, on the pins. So these icons need to continue their story somehow, like how it's all brought together.
Exactly.
So, a little bit of trivia. The storyteller's origin name was going to be Mythos, but was changed to avoid the confusion with the restaurant located in Islands of Adventure, which I can agree. I mean, it would
Yeah.
have been a cool ass name.
Yeah, but then like I feel like it wouldn't fit her, like her design as like an older lady. Because Mythos
Yeah.
for me sounds like a wise, bearded Gandalf-looking dude.
Or Mystic. I
Or
feel like
Mystic, yeah.
I really like the name Mystic.
Mystic would be cool, yeah. But again,
So-
like I feel like it wouldn't fit her design, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder where like the inspiration for Elsa came from, other than Frozen. But that wasn't a thing back in the day. I'm now like I hate that Elsa is such a prominent name, like
Because of
it's like,
Frozen.
because of Frozen now. But like, I wonder where they came up with the idea, or where they had to look for that inspiration. But out of all the icons, she has the least developed backstory, which I can see why. But I feel like within the story, I feel like there should be some kind of context that should be brought back, so we can actually see her like story go full round. And then for Howling Horror Nights 20, she would threaten guests with some gruesome death if they asked about her backstory. Oh,
Which is I like that little
Ooh.
detail. It's like that's how that's how they kept her mysterious. And you're like, oh, where'd you come from? How about I tie you up and feed you to a bird? And you're like, never mind.
that's
That would be terrifying if like I asked somebody, it's like, oh, where you're from? It's like, if you ask me that question again, I will literally eviscerate you with a knife.
it does remind me a little bit of The Visit. Like, old ladies are supposed to be cute
Oh,
and
yeah.
sweet, and then you have grandparents that are possessed by demons, and they're trying to chase you around the house. I was like, I will tear your shit apart. I was like,
And not only
okay.
that, they will also poop in their diapers and smack your face into them, which is disgusting.
I was like, I love old people. I really do. But it's just the fact that, like, it's just, like, that movie. And then this just makes me think that Elsa is the Terror Queen. Because I'm like, you're just having PTSD of your death at this point. Like, but you came back. Not as pretty and not as powerful. But I feel like you can manage. Yeah, but you came back. So, what is next, Yusuf?
So our next icon is another lovely lady, goes by the name of Bloody Mary.
She's my favorite with the story. I mean, she has a lot of context.
Yes, I love Bloody Mary's story. But right off the bat, I can tell you a couple things. She was a witch who served as the icon for HHN 18, Reflections of Fear. She was based on the legend of Bloody Mary. However, Universal did create an elaborate backstory for her, for a transformation from psychiatrist to Bloody Mary. And she was based on existing sources, but her backstory, her design, and her personality, they're all original. And
Amazing.
so she can be counted as an icon that is both licensed and a Universal original at the same time because of this.
Oh,
is pretty interesting,
so
yeah.
like, it's just the fact that like Bloody Mary is such a story that follows us all the time as we were kids, or like when I don't know if you ever had this happen to you at school, but like when they're like, oh, we saw Bloody Mary in the bathroom, and then you try and do it with your friends
Yeah.
holding you down, like it's like let's turn off the lights. That's if your bathroom didn't have like a window with like bright sunlight, but if it was dark, like you guys would try and do it, and then I don't know if people actually saw Bloody Mary or if they were trying to
I don't know.
scare
See,
other kids.
I would
mean,
never try
it happened to
I'm
me.
Like, yeah, I'm never gonna try that. I know better.
Oh, I did it when I was in elementary school, but nothing really happened. I just saw one. I remember one time being in the lunchroom and just hearing these girls' blood curdling screams and just say, "We saw Bloody Mary." And so I was
Oh
like,
my
"Oh
god.
God, what the frick?" So like I did it with a couple of my friends. I was like, nothing happened, but okay, bogus. But I guess one of them like was trying to pretend or being creepy or was blessed with the voice acting because they said that they heard her. I was like, it was it was a fun time in elementary school.
See, I didn't have Bloody Mary, but we had a ghost nun that would walk around the school. Because I used to go to Catholic school, so we had a
Oh,
nun that was a
Insidious?
ghost.
What? Well, no, Conjuring. Conjuring. My bad.
Yeah, something like that. We had a nun that was a ghost.
Yeah, no, it was no, it was definitely Insidious. I think it's
No,
Insidious.
no, that was the nun from The Conjuring.
Oh yes, yes. So I was right the first time, and then I
You
was
were.
like, wait, Insidious also has like a nun? Yes? No?
No, it's
I
the
don't
woman in black.
remember.
That's the woman in black, naturally a man.
Ah, ooh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, anyway, so this is what I'm going to say about Bloody Mary. Her story is extremely long and very, very elaborate. So bear with me. It's a bit of a read here. So I'm just gonna walk you guys through it. So we start off in 1908, and we're gonna start off with a lady called Mary Worthington. She was a school teacher in the small town of, you guessed it, Cary, Ohio, and she vanished on August 27th, 1908, as a result of a Halloween prank. 6 students were involved in the mysterious death of the teacher, or disappearance, and we'll go back to that because these 6 students do come back later on. Now, at one point, the schoolmaster found the schoolhouse in disarray with blood and shards of glass scattered across the room, and although she was suspected murdered, Worthington's body was never found. Now we flash forward to 1958, and now we're talking about Marie Agana. She's the daughter of Mary Worthington, and she dies in 1958. And her daughter, Dr. Mary Agana, receives a letter from the family lawyer informing her that she would come into the possession of several valuable silver heirlooms that belonged to her grandmother. Among these was a silver jewelry and music box, which contained a presence that seemed to possess Dr. Agana over time. 5 days later, she received a letter from the National Association of Mental Health denying her request for funding her immersive fear therapy program. Agana instead decided to open her own facility and began her immersive therapy program. She hired assistants, but those were believed to be ex-cons and actual mental patients.
Oh, well, that's a great way to start your
Yeah,
business. It's like we'll hire convicts. It's fine.
You have a terrific resume. Oh, you said you killed 3 men? Come on board. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, we
We have a great
that.
benefits package.
Yeah, but you just got to install fear into people and hold them down for me while I
Yeah.
spread some spiders, some clowns, some stuff in their face, and hopefully this is a success. So just don't tell anybody that I opened this without anybody's permission. But okay.
Exactly. Now, for months, though, Agana was seeing several patients to discover new ways to cure their fear. At one point, a freelance photographer disappears, and what's important here is this photographer was actually hired by a private investigator by the name of Boris Schuster. And because of this guy's disappearance, Schuster began investigating Agana's clinic. And then patients began to disappear, and Schuster began to wonder what was really going on in that facility. So he decides to make an appointment with her on August 27th, 1958, to discover the truth. Now, on that same night, Agana was brutally murdered, supposedly by Boris Schuster, but her body was never found. Her body, just like her grandmother's, vanished. And now some believed that the spirit of Bloody Mary, or Agana's grandmother, had been possessing Agana since she received the heirlooms months earlier.
Oh, that seems like a messed up family.
It does. And now
that's just...
And now we flash forward another 50 years. We're talking 2008. And this is where Legendary Truth, the Collective, comes in. This is a paranormal investigation group that was created by Boris Schuster after the events of 1958. and they actually began an investigation into the disappearance of Agana. And on August 27th, 2008, a manifestation of Bloody Mary was detected by field agents who also vanished. It is believed that at this time, Agana had become a witch and had broken out of her mirror. Now, with some of her high-ranking minions that she was able to create, including the Evil Queen, Samhain, and workers from Gorewood Forest, which are actually the body collectors, they used Universal Studios to create a portal to her mirror world under the guise of Halloween Horror Nights.
Oh,
And
so I
not
mean,
only
like,
that, so essentially, Halloween Horror Nights 18 was all created by her.
oh,
It was actually you entering her world, which
I
is a pretty cool
mean,
idea.
yeah, we're just like with all with tales and like fears and all that other stuff. Like she's involved with all basically a lot of the tales that we have grew up with. Like we have the Humpty Dumpty, and then we have like Rapunzel. So she's kind of like this other queen of stories,
Yep.
almost next to Elsa.
Yeah. So she has such a huge amount of power that she actually possessed Universal itself in order to advertise her image and bring unwitting visitors to the event. So all the advertisements, that was all her too.
Ooh.
Yeah. So her world itself, once you would enter her world, it was actually comprised of 5 realms: fears, tales, urban legends, nightmares, and myths. Um, and the CEO of Legendary Truth dispatched field agents into Agana's world to collect additional information on the Doctor and Bloody Mary herself, as well as the patients that had died due to her treatments.
See, what is up with Universal throwing these groups in? I'm like, here's the sacrificial lamb again. Here it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah,
This,
now you're a group of paranormal investigators.
and you guys are also gonna disappear and die, whichever one comes first. Be the significance behind these
Yeah.
awesome icons. Just terrible. Imagine if those groups actually really existed. I'm like, yeah, we don't want to get involved with Universal there.
Nope. Sorry, but no. Now, after 2008, things get a little bit spotty in terms of her story, because back in 2010, many of the characters attended the arrival of Fear, except for her, which also makes it highly likely that she was not one of the heralds of Fear. However, some of her minions were allowed to roam free, like some of her people that she created. Now, what's interesting is a 2015 investigation by the Legendary Truth showed some evidence that Mary was involved in that year's event in some way or another. And based on that evidence, it looks like Mary was actually the one that opened the lantern and was able to release Jack so that he could bring back the Carnival of Carnage.
Ooh, so she was the responsible. Love
Yep.
that. But I wish they actually physically brought her back in some shape or form.
I would
Like
love
I
for
feel
her to
like it
come
would have
back.
been. Well, she has a lot of like information for something that only lived for like a year.
Yeah. So another thing too was interesting that in one of her commercials promoting the event, in an uncut version of one of those, it showed that Mary could actually come out of her mirror whenever she wanted. You didn't have to say her name 3 times for her to come out. She could just do it at will. And it kind of suggests that at some point she kind of just walked out of the mirror and just started to walk among the earth. One of the things, one of the reasons that have been put forward as to like why she hasn't appeared is, one of them is supposedly that she got bored of the mirror world, so she just decided to like do her own thing, or she kind of retired, which I don't really believe. I'm like, no, she's coming back in some form or another. But what they're saying is, based on the reason as to why she released Jack from the lantern, is that her and Jack have some sort of vendetta against Fear.
Ooh. I mean,
So,
like that's kind of fair, but at the same
Yeah.
time, but because Jack
kind of thin.
wants his, Jack wants his fun. He wants to be the center of attention always.
Yeah.
And Bloody Mary, she just wants to install fear into people and just be the center of attention as usual.
So-
Like she just wants to be remembered.
Yeah, so what I'm thinking is, like, their reason for it was this, that She was mad because Fear did not select her as a herald, and Jack was mad because he was a herald of Fear. He wanted to be the main attraction.
Ooh.
And like
I
that's why they were
mean,
like team up against Fear.
yeah. I mean, I can see that.
Yeah. But what I do like about her too is she has a very expanded personality as well, where she has like kind of ins and outs to her psyche.
Mm-hmm.
So she does bear a lot of similarities to the caretaker, because just like the caretaker, she was just doing research at the time, but she actually accidentally killed one of her patients, and from then on, she kind of found herself more interested in torturing them to reveal their fears and to treat their fears in her own way.
Oh,
And now,
that's.
kind of creepy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's interesting about this, her biggest fear was the fear of death. So her
Ha.
killing her patients was her form of therapy. Yes.
Love that. It's
And
just.
what's even more interesting, the patients that she was treating, all six who died, were the descendants of the six students that were involved in her grandmother's disappearance.
Oh, it just makes me wonder what really happened to her grandmother, despite all
Yeah.
that craziness. And it's just, it's just a story that goes so well hand in hand. Like,
Hmm.
especially her form of therapy. But then there's like the caretaker that just wanted to kill people to see what happens after death, and then
Yeah,
she
I
just
feel like,
wants with the fears. And I feel like, wow, like, is that Cindy's mother?
yeah, like
What?
I definitely feel that Universal went all out when creating her backstory.
Yeah, or they
Like
had way too
they,
much time on their hands at that point.
no, maybe.
No.
Yeah. Now another couple like little bits of trivia too was that bursting through the mirror for her was actually extremely painful, and that's why and it would leave a lot of scars on her face and body, which is why she had that design, look wise. Like
Oh.
she had a lot of scars on her face, scars all over her body, because every time she burst from the mirror, it would hurt her.
Oh.
Yeah.
Makes me feel sad for her in a way.
Yeah, she's a little bit of a tragic villain, little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
the fact that she still kill people is wrong. Don't kill people.
Yeah. Like, there's so much,
Um,
all the
and
things are wrong.
yeah. And also from the website, based on journal entries that used to be on the 2008 version of the HHN website, it sort of implied that she was suffering from dissociative identity disorder,
I mean,
which would kind of
I
explain
totally
her
believe
break from
it.
reality. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she, like I said, it's just like with the phobias and everything else.
Hmm.
Like, she just wanted something to be able to take the pain away. And, it's like she just became a totally different person than when what she originally intended to be. From someone that wanted to help people to just, someone that just got off on, you know, killing people with their fears or like using their fears, which is totally fucked up, but.
Yeah.
Oh man. What a
And then
story.
another interesting little piece of trivia. She's actually the only icon to have ever been shown with a pre-icon look. So in other words, we saw what she looked like before she was Bloody Mary.
Oh, I never saw that. You're gonna have to send me that one day.
I'll have to look at
That's
the
really
pictures.
cool.
I think it was like part of the Horror Nights website at the time.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
But yeah, that was another interesting fact about her.
All right, so we are going now to the year that I first started Halloween Horror Nights, and it was the Usher.
Woohoo!
He is also another film type icon, not kind of like the director, but he also is a film fanatic as well. So his name is Julian Browning, and he was the main icon for Halloween Horror Nights 19, ripped from the silver screen. So his backstory is that Julian Browning was an usher at the Universal Palace Theater, a popular movie house converted from a playhouse in the 1920s. Browning loved his job and loved movies, specifically horror films. And Browning was very strict about following the rules and basically hated rude moviegoers, like, the type that's like silence your cell phone.
Yes.
Don't talk during a movie. Proper, that kind of etiquette that we all have learned in movie theaters. Not that we have experienced movie theaters right now. So if you're listening to this past 2020, this is during the pandemic. What? But other than that, during a 1940 re-release of The Phantom of the Opera, Browning engaged in a scuffle with a rude patron. The patron seized Browning's flashlight and threw it, ripping a hole in the new screen. When Julian went to retrieve his flashlight, he was entangled in one of the old sandbag ropes. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, that's
That's
terrifying.
one way. It's like those things that you see in movies. Like once you're entangled in one of those like sandbag ropes, it's kind of like it's hard to get out of. Especially
Yeah,
I heard that you get like entangled very easily. So this caused him to die of strangulation,
lovely.
which explains his look. He is very pale with pink, darkish eyes, and it looks like he's been asphyxiated. And
Mm-hmm.
you could probably see a couple of veins in his design. And this was probably the first of many horrible events that took place in the theater. It was rumored that the theater was evil, or that Julian's revenge was to destroy the rule breaking patrons. So basically, it's a usher that will punish you if you don't follow movie etiquette. Like, don't be a dick and just
Exactly.
watch the movie.
I think
Then
that's why I relate with him so well, because like whenever you go to the movies, you're like you never want to get stuck with that one person that's like talking the entire time, and you're like, shut up.
uh, but I wish Usher and Jack could work together, because what I would give
Oh
to
my
for
god.
that to happen to children. Love that. It's absolutely fantastic. Um, but because children, when they cry in the movie, it's terrible.
like
So,
Jack like loses his job at the like he loses the carnival and has to like make some money, so he just works part time with
um,
Julian at the theater.
but the thing is, like, it happened in 1920. Jack was locked up, so that wouldn't have happened anyway. If this was in 1940, so for like 20 years after that, so sad times. But Julian was the last of Fear's heralds, which is kind of unique to me, I think, because Julian was a newcomer to this icon world, and it's kind of crazy that they decided to go with an icon in year 19. I mean, I know that there have been some years where they will go without an icon, but they've been having an icon almost every year until year 20, which is crazy because 19 is an odd number.
Hmm.
Let's be real here. But the fact that he was the last that was an embodiment of fear, which is what's crazy to me. And and he also embodies the vengeance due to his violent punishments of breakers. I mean, I don't blame him.
Yeah,
Like, I wish I could do that, but
don't
that
break the
would get me
rules.
locked up in jail. Not
Yep.
that it matters,
You,
because
you,
we
I,
have like home theaters now. We're living in a time where we have to be the basically responsible for our actions when we're watching a movie. Because then you were
yeah.
saying, "Oh, did you watch that movie?" Sorry, I was on my phone looking at Instagram. It's terrible. We're very guilty of that. So if you guys don't actually do that, shut up. You know you're lying. Anyway, so the appearances that the ushers did or did not have, the usher did not appear on any merchandise or advertisements. It's just, I think that year it was just mainly the faces of Chucky,
Yeah.
Wolfman, and Jigsaw.
Yeah, they were just promoting. They
Because
were mostly promoting the IPs that they had.
Yeah, because I do remember seeing this on the highway, which it was just a shattered, like a ripped, shattered type movie theater
Yeah,
screen, and it had like these red curtains, and it said "ripped from the silver screen in blood." It looked very vintage esque,
very
sort of kind
cinematic.
of like a very like B movie ish, but it wasn't really B movie since they were
Mm.
using IPs. I think that was like the many times other than the collaboration with New Line Cinema that they have had an IP that was more modern in a
Exactly.
sense. So um, he also would show up for television interviews, though.
Which
So
is
that is
really
also
funny
interesting.
because I specifically remember this one time he showed up on one of the local news stations for an interview, and it was really funny because they're like interviewing him, and he's like, oh, you have to be quiet in the movie theater, and he has to get like a little flashlight with him and stuff.
Oh, that is so cool. It
Yeah,
just reminds me a little bit of Tower Terror. Like
a
his
little bit,
outfit
yeah,
already. A little
yeah.
bit bellhop, a little Tower Terror here and there. But, it's more uh, a movie etiquette, which is fine in a interview, like to
Hmm.
enforce that because not like anybody, you know, stuff like that. So, words. But also appeared on Howling Horror Nights website as well as the website intro. And he also appeared in the Silver Scream's house in 2009 as well as the main entrance. Appeared in 2010 along with his fellow icons and reappeared again in 2015 with his fellow icons as one of Jack's maniacs. So you would think maybe they're a sub leader to the people of the cult, or they're probably a part of the cult. Which one would
I
you
think
actually say?
I think they were like, yeah, almost like a hierarchy type thing where it's like Jack's at the top, and then they're like the next rung, and then all their followers are the rest of Jack's maniacs.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a good way to go. I mean,
Yeah,
there's always a second in command, and I feel like all the icons that
we're
were
like
at
the
the
second in
bottom.
command. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, which one is next as we are going later and later down into the world of the Halloween Horror Nights 20s rather than the early startings of the icons?
So the next icon that we're talking about is one of the strangest additions to the icon lineup, and I know that you're not a very big fan first, but we're talking about Lady Luck.
Ew.
So Lady Luck was the icon for HHN 21. She was shown as a beautiful, seductive, and mysterious woman. But the more chances you take with her, she slowly would transform into this like twisted monster. And interestingly enough, she was the second event icon to not have an icon house next to Fear. She actually had her own scare zone, but not a house.
It was freaking terrible. She looked like this gremlin on freaking crack. It's just terrible. Like, I hated that. Well, I didn't hate that year. I loved a lot of the houses that year. But it was just her. It was so disappointing because she seemed so cool and I love the Las Vegas and California aesthetic.
Hmm.
Just not her.
I still remember the commercials for that too, because where she's like throwing the knives at the guy that's like spinning on the thing.
I'm pretty sure that was her creator. I'm pretty sure that was
Really?
Patrick. Mm-hmm.
That's funny.
Mm-hmm.
So she doesn't have like a huge backstory, but I'm gonna give you guys what I have found on my research. So Lady Luck is described as a shape-shifting succubus that has been around since man began taking chances. In other words, since the beginning of time. She has been compared to Taichi, the Greek goddess of luck, or her Roman counterpart Fortuna. Now, what she does is she causes bad things to happen to whoever gambles with her and loses. Um, Bad things also happen if she gives someone a choice and they make the wrong choice. Um, Now, backstory-wise, main story that I could find about her was regarding a gentleman by the name of Floyd Mercer. This was a prisoner that was in a Shady Brook Asylum, and 1 year before the asylum closed down, he hung himself. When they found his body, they found in his possession a notebook that had quotes about luck. So Floyd was actually the only known person to have ever gambled with Lady Luck and survived. So Floyd and one of his friends were playing poker with Lady Luck, and they both won. However, later on that same night, Floyd did see his friend getting killed by Lady Luck, and he escaped. Now, after that, he faked insanity in order to get locked up in Shady Brook, just to try and get away from her. However, when he realized that Lady Luck knew where he was, he decided to hang himself. And ever since then, Lady Luck makes sure that everyone takes an extra gamble. So let's say you take a gamble and you win. She's like, "You sure you want to try it again?" Type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she did return again in 2015 as one of Jack's maniacs, but I barely
Oh.
didn't really see her in anything.
I didn't see her in anything either, which is why I'm like a well-deserved nothing.
She was one of those bottom ones.
Oh god. Well, like if you really think about it, like storyteller and the director. Well, not so much the director anymore, but the storyteller is practically at the bottom with Bloody Mary, but she was awful.
Well, I mean, no,
Like,
I would say in terms of like they were actually shown around the park and stuff. Like Lady Luck was
yeah.
nowhere to be found in that event at all.
Oof. Oof.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned earlier with her appearances, although she didn't have her own haunted house, she did play a key role in each of the houses that year for HHN 21. So, in the house Winter's Night, she takes the form of an old spinster and offers Jonathan Hawthorne between two plots of land to choose from. So he chooses the plot of land that eventually becomes Hawthorne Cemetery and kind of sets the story in motion. And in Nightingales, she takes the form of two different World War I posters. One that's kind of persuading young men to go to the war, and the other one to stay at home and donate food for the war cause. Of course, characters take the left poster or one of the posters that inspires them to fight, and they end up, being in World War One and finding themselves surrounded by enemy soldiers and like carnivorous banshees that are disguised as nurses.
Oh my god, I remember that year. That house was so scary.
And
Anything
then
Nightingale scares me. Anything with Nightingales.
I want to see more Nightingales in the future.
Oh, for sure. Even though like it's just the smells that they use. It's disgusting. Anyway.
And then in The Thing, she actually takes the place of an air traffic controller and gives the pilot of a helicopter the choice of going to a town to refuel or heading straight to a base where the alien creature was just unleashed. Juliet, or the helicopter pilot, decides to go to the base, and then she becomes a part of the story. She becomes part of the paranoia and the horror of the alien that's been released. And then in HR Blood and Guts, she takes the place of the secretary for Blood and Guts talent agency, and she's the one that tells him that the only role that they were able to find for him was as HR Blood and Guts, and if he takes the offer down, they wouldn't be able to represent him. So of course he takes the offer, and that's what creates a murderous rampage on his show.
Oh, that's so cool. Love that.
And
Even though
then,
she's useless. She's still useless, but cool.
Yeah, at least she has like something to do in the houses, but
Yeah.
and then in Sauce and Steam, she takes the form of a test administrator for the fake paradise known as the Horizon. And the ones who passed the test were the ones that were taken to a facility where they were harvested for their bodily fluids. In Nevermore, she takes the place of a ticket taker when Edgar Allan Poe must decide between going to Boston, which is where he was born, or going to Baltimore, where he would marry Virginia Clem. He unfortunately chooses Baltimore, and that's actually where the start of his descent into madness begins.
Oh, that's really cool. I really loved that house. That house was really cool, and it featured all the classic stories that like Edgar Allan Poe. Like it did feature the Red Death, the Mask of the Red Death, and
Yes.
Telltale Heart as well.
And then in the in-between, a college student uses his professor's assistant privilege, and he acquires this object that kind of looks like a Ouija board. And there, Lady Luck takes the form of his professor and leaves him a message on his cell phone saying, "Hey, this item is dangerous. You got to bring it back." He ignores her, and he plays around with the object and actually opens a portal to a demonic world, and him and his friend are burned to death. And in The Forsaken, she takes the form of the Queen of Spain, and she wants to settle a dispute between Christopher Columbus and Antonio Cabot over who should lead the expedition into the New World. And because of that, she offers to flip a coin. So Cabot calls head and Columbus calls tails, and the coin lands on tails. But so they choose Columbus to lead the expedition. However, Cabot, during the expedition, tries to plan a mutiny, but one of his soldiers tells Columbus, and Columbus sinks his ship and just reports that he was lost at sea.
Oh wow, what a dick!
Yeah, right.
It's like, oh, you wanted to discover the new land too fucking bad.
It's like, oh, you want to look at new land? You can look at the new land at the bottom of the ocean.
Oh, no.
Boom.
Boom. Anyway.
Yeah. So based on our timing here, it looks like we're gonna have to cut this one here, because we still have a couple of icons that we need to discuss, and we don't want to make this podcast too long.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we're gonna stop it right here, and the next week's episode will be the second part to the remaining icons that we wanted to talk about.
Absolutely. I think we got through a lot.
We certainly did.
It's just a lot of the icons. They're very iconic. I mean, I feel like Lady Luck shouldn't have been included, but like
Oh, come
it was towards the end, so it's fine. But
on.
we pick up where it's actually good, and I'm gonna leave that for next podcast.
Yes. Um, but yeah, I mean, I had a blast doing the research for this. I definitely learned a lot about these icons, and I'm really hoping that you guys were able to learn a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a little bit hard to find a whole lot of backstory into these
Hmm.
characters, especially since it is not something that is very officially published by the company.
Exactly.
But there are people on the inside, the creative team, that have, I feel like they do those little purposed leakage of stories so we can feel and understand the characters or where they all reside in this all like this huge universe of Halloween Horror Nights.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely like the best way for us to kind of not just see them as this character and boom, that's it. Like we it's cool to like see what's behind that, you know.
Absolutely.
Well, anyway, where can we find you, Vanya?
You can find me on Twitter and on YouTube under HHN Cultist. I do makeups, fashion, vlogs, and things that have to do with horror, Horror Nights, and Universal. How about you, Yusef? Where can we find
So,
you or us?
you can find me on Twitter at Sounds from the Grave, on Instagram as Sounds from the Grave, and on Facebook as Sounds from the Grave. And for my personal stuff, you can find me on Instagram at Yusef1220. This podcast is on Anchor, it's on Spotify, and we're on Apple. So whichever one you use, just give us a listen. If you're on Apple, if you wouldn't mind giving us a review, let us know if we're doing a good job. If you want us to do something better, we will definitely try our best to do so. And
Absolutely.
and if you have any suggestions for stuff that we could talk about or ideas, don't be afraid to shoot us a message on Twitter or on Instagram. We'll take a look at
Or
it, and
comment.
yeah, and we'll try to work a podcast into it.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely. And
yep.
I had so much fun at reading, so
Yeah, me too.
it's great.
All right, so we'll catch you
All
guys
right,
next
guys.
week.
See you.
Bye.